Thank you, everyone. My name is Miriam. I am here on behalf of CL Creative Space. We are a photo studio and event space in Berkeley, California. And we are really honored to host this important panel today. I have 4 guests with us. And before I introduce them, I just wanted to acknowledge what a challenging time we're in right now. So I feel really fortunate just to be able to come together and sit with you all and have the internet and have semi-clean air to breathe and just have the capacity to even talk about this topic today. So I just want to express my gratitude for that and gratitude to all of you for being here, all the things that have brought you here today. So thank you. All right, so as you all know who signed up for our event today, we are talking about equal pay in the United States, specifically as it pertains to Black women. The statistics show a huge disparity in equal pay and salaries for Black women. And there's no reason for that to continue after today. So we're gonna address it. We're gonna get it solved right here. I can't wait. I wanna introduce this talented group of women that are here today. I'm gonna go from left to right on my screen here. We have Michelle Singleton. You are a creative director and then some. If you want to give us a little brief intro into yourself and your main work, we appreciate that. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Yeah, I wear many hats. I've been, wearing the hat of a leader for the last couple years as I co-founded Her Places In, which is an art organization dedicated to social impact. So through storytelling, we create beautiful art, photography specifically, and also have been doing other work in the community, working with the youth, with partnerships and working with orgs that, really need to build out their storytelling better with the population that they're working with. I am from the Bay Area, but I live in Atlanta now. And outside of that, I'm very big in wellness, self-care. I'm studying plant medicine and then some. So that's just me. I'm a big people person. So I'm missing my friends during this time of lockdown, but I'm so happy we have this space to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm really glad to have you here, and I'm excited for everyone to hear about some of the projects you've been working on. Next, we have Jendae Smith. She's a senior designer and in several different areas. Currently based in LA, but from the Bay Area, and a dear friend of mine. So Jendae, you want to tell us about yourself?
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Jendae, and yes, I'm originally from Oakland, California, so shout out Oakland and any of my friends that are on here. And then after I left Oakland, I went to Howard University to study fashion, and after that, I moved to New York. So I worked in the fashion industry for over 8 years. I worked as a assistant buyer. I worked in product development. I also worked as a personal shopper at Saks Fifth Avenue, and I hated all of my jobs. So I decided to go back to school and study fashion design at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City. And then after that, I started working as a fashion designer, and I loved it. And I loved it, but I was over New York, I should say. So I decided to move back to California, and I've been here since 2013. And I've been working in the children's toy industry since 2014. So now I am a senior graphic designer, love what I do. Quality of life has just improved immensely since I moved back to California. Not hating on New York, I love it there. But I'm happy to be here, and thank you for having me on the panel. I'm excited to talk about this.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you, Gender. All right, next we have Precious J. Stroud. I want to say, I'm going to speak to your work founding the Black Female Project. I know you have consulting business as well. Will you share a little bit about yourself, Precious? Let's see. Hold on, Precious, you are on mute right now.
Hi, my name is Precious Stroud, and thank you, Miriam. I founded the Black Female Project, and it came to life. It's great to have an idea, but then it takes a lot of ingenuity and love and nurturing to make things real. So I really want to acknowledge all of the founding people who helped us and some of our members who are on the line today. So thank you for being here. The Black Female Project prepares Black women for the realities of the workplace and also celebrates Black women who thrive at work and really affirm us, because that affirmation is really important, contrary to some of the isolation that persists. And equal pay is one of those topics, but there are several. And so we needed a place where we just could be ourselves and kind of restore ourselves and be healed and share our stories. So that's what Black Female Project is about. At the same time that Black Female Project started, I started a communications firm, and we focus on asset-based narrative design and marketing. So it's a little bit. Thank you for having me.
That's excellent. Thanks, Precious. Okay, and we have Roz, the founder of the People's Conservatory, which here at Roz Nash. Let me get your last name. Sorry. So, Roz, the People's Conservatory, we have a lovely relationship with Seattle Creative Space. As you know, we are major supporters and fans. Please tell everyone that doesn't already know a little bit about what you all do.
Thanks, Miriam. And ladies, I'm so excited to be on this panel with you and learn more about you. And Precious, I'm already excited to find out when we can all come together and talk about our stuff, because that sounds amazing. So I'm just excited. It sounds incredible. I am, first and foremost, I'm a musician. I've been a musician for about 28 years. And moved to New York also, Jende. I moved to New York after I left San Francisco when I was 17, and was like, I'm going to be a rock star, you know. Then it took many, many years of you know, toils and, you know, tours and being broke and trying to figure out, how am I going to do this? Because I know I'm supposed to do this. But it was a beautiful time in New York, being a musician in the 90s and in the 2000s. And what I found as I was doing that was, when I needed to support myself outside of music, I found youth development and teaching and working with youth in the arts in different organizations in New York, and started to really take a deep dive into that in Brooklyn and in the Bronx and in Manhattan, and try to do whatever I could to support Black and brown youth in those neighborhoods that have been underserved and just were not receiving any kind of arts exposure. To me, that is my whole life, and it has saved my life. So I always had a dream of creating my own arts conservatory. So, you know, when I moved back to San Francisco, actually I'm from San Francisco, but I decided to move to Oakland about 2014. That's when I was like, okay, it's time. I'm 40. I'm supposed to realize this dream. And decided to found this arts conservatory for youth. We serve youth K through 12. We started in a small school in East Oakland and then developed out to serve over 20 schools now in just 2 years. I have an amazing staff of incredible master artists and professionals in all areas of art, media, visual art, dance, music. And it's just been really exciting to be able to support schools that never thought that they could have arts programming, and to give them a lifeline and give them a source and say, hey, it's actually imperative that you have arts programming, because our youth need this. Our youth express themselves through this. Our youth find themselves through this. Our youth discover who they are through this. And that's how they're going to be able to speak to, you know, writing and arithmetic and history, is if they have that confidence and that self-worth and that self-knowledge first. And so for us, it's very much important to have a cultural representative model of how you teach art. So that's kind of our focus and our specialty. So thank you for having me.
All right, so I want to share some information. Last year when I learned about the Equal Pay Day for Black women, well, I think originally there was a lot more media around just women, the gender pay gap, right? So we see that as more of a mainstream conversation. There's a date associated with this. For those of you all who don't know, this date represents the number of days that someone would need to work into the following year to receive the same amount of salary that a white non-Hispanic male would earn in the same or similar role for the previous year. So what these statistics have found is that for white women, this date leads about 3 months into the following year in March. And then for Black women in the United States, this date goes all the way into August. So, we're talking about another 8 months of work in the same type of work in order to be paid an equal amount of money. So last year, this date was on the 22nd of August. This year, the date is on the 13th of August. That's not enough progress. So this issue is still quite relevant, as all of you know quite well. For those of you who are just learning about this incredible pay gap, I wanted to share some quick facts with all of you. So we have, this was interesting actually, and I think this is important to note because when we talk about statistics, we know that there is a range. 26% of US companies track the differences in salary right now. So part of the problem with this is that companies aren't sharing their information, right? So I wanted to jump into that first with all of you to address like how do we get this information out there. Let's talk about transparency from the company's perspective, and then I'd love to talk about transparency on the human level and what we all can do as individuals. But Precious, because your work is focused on the workplace, I'd love to hear what you have to say about from the company's perspective. What in your experience are you seeing as far as that sort of transparency about salaries?
Let's say from the research that we've read or the research that we keep hearing is that even if you look at the Stark data, just because it's more shared than it is in other places in the tech industry, that people aren't necessarily, like the big step was actually collecting the data. That was the big step. It wasn't even changing anything. It was first to acknowledge that there was a problem in Black and white. Whereas if you had spoken to any of us, we would have been able to tell you that there was a difference, and we were very aware of that difference. So as far as companies go, I'd say there are a lot of people out here, like literally right now, doing that research and that work. And there's a lot of information coming out about solutions right now, like what companies can do. From where we sit, we really look at the Black woman's experience within the context of all of this. So our learning is more centered on how do you navigate today and how are you going to navigate as things shift, but really not holding, not looking at these things as personal, like it really is structural, which is what you're elevating around what can a company do to acknowledge and then change what's going on. So I don't want to misstep by by saying companies need to do X, Y, Z. But what I will say is that if you're not even demonstrating that you're aware of the problem, there's no way that you're working on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I mean, right now we're seeing a lot more exposure, of course, via social media, as far as taking companies to task, calling out their ethics, asking for more transparency. How would you say, Jende, in your experience, when you went to historically Black college, you went to Howard University, would you say that this conversation specifically around gap in pay was part of your conversations, either like in curriculum or socially, or neither, or both?
Honestly, I heard about it. I hadn't thought about it until maybe a couple of years ago when it started to come to light. And I think that's important to talk about because it is something that, like, this panel is very important because it's something that we all need to talk about. And I know, like you were saying, people are talking about it on social media. I've been seeing a lot of posts about it. So I really think that's a start. I don't remember hearing about it at Howard. Maybe it was talked about at some point, but my thought was always like, and of course, I know there's systemic racism, so I'm not discrediting. I mean, I know that's out there. Obviously, that's a huge part of this. But I always thought, like, okay, you come into a company, you're an assistant designer or whatever, you have 2 years of experience, so you get paid this amount. Everybody gets paid that amount. But there's a lot more nuance to it, of course. And then there's also racism on top of that. So I'm just excited that this is being talked about because I think that's the first step. And a lot of companies are doing these audits, and that is another way to hold them accountable and releasing the information too. So you can't just say, oh yeah, everybody's being paid equal, an equitable amount. Like, no, show us the numbers. Mm-hmm. Like, we need to know. So I think it's up to us, the people, of course, to push for it. And I'm excited to see the changes that are happening and the conversations that are happening now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of conversation right now around what being an ally looks like. We didn't create this panel today with the intention of educating people on what that looks like. But I do think that what you're saying is a relevant point to that, which is it's not just the people on the panel today that are going to companies and saying, where's the transparency? Every single person that works for an employer can ask for that transparency. And that's a really powerful action to take. It's relatively simple and powerful. So, I wanted to ask you, Roz, you were talking a little bit about transitioning in your life, in your career, in your interests. And I'd like to pose this question to all of you. It's something I wonder if you've taken the time to reflect on it, but besides being aware of systemic racism at a very young age, how has the gap in pay specifically impacted the decisions or the dreams or the career choices that you've made? If you were to reflect on that, do you think that your path would have been different?
Well, I actually had an experience with this a couple of years ago when I first moved back to Oakland and started working at a new school, a school that was actually founded by Black and Brown folks. I was one of the founders, and I was one of the founding directors. And I actually learned from an ally, one of my best friends, who was Latina. She happened to see my pay stub. And she was like, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're making easily $10,000 less than I am. and you've been a director twice as long as I have. And I was just like in shock. I just, because I kind of came into the organization saying, what I think a lot of us do was say, well, you know what, I don't want to ask for too much because, we're all people of color here trying to build something, and we're going to do what we can, and we're going to get in. And if that's all you can pay me, that's cool. I know we're all going to rise together, But then I found that even within that organization that was not run by white people, that I was receiving unequal pay. And I had to fight for that, and I did immediately, and brought attention to it, and let them know this won't stand. You took advantage of me wanting to be a partner, and not realize that my record speaks for itself in a way that you should have really honored. So I just found that was very interesting, because they're not just in spaces, white spaces. There is internalized racism. There is, it is in all of us, and it shows up in all of these really interesting ways that I hadn't expected. You think you're in the promised land when everything is run by people of color, and we gonna do this together. And we realize there's a lot of dismantling of our own internalized patriarchy and racism that has to happen before we get there. And I learned a lot about that. So that was my own personal experience with it. And I think it helped to make me realize even more why I needed to start my own organization. I generally work for myself, probably for that reason, so that I can set my own pay. And I just realized, what, this is why I don't have a job. This is why I run my own organizations. And I just kind of said, okay, it's time to do that. So that was my answer to that, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that's really significant, because you're saying essentially you went another route. Yeah, it's powerful. What about any of you, if you reflect on, the sort of career choices or directions that you've gone in, do you have a sense that you may have done things differently or would do things differently? Michelle, how about you?
I don't know if I can say like if I would have done things differently. I think like at least a path, like maybe not a different path, but there were some things that I just wish I would have had earlier on as I navigated my way through my professional career. And I spoke about the organization that I co-founded, but prior to that, it was very similar to what Roz was saying, is in terms of like, hey, like I created my own space because I wasn't actually getting that in professional settings. And there was a lack of mentorship. I will say that, I had to find out through peers and colleagues that I was being paid significantly less than, a white woman. And because they openly shared that information, if that information was never offered to me, I would have never known. And I would have continued to like see my value as very, very low, because unfortunately I didn't have mentorship as a younger woman, and figuring out like ways to negotiate. So maybe I would have taken a different route, but I think that maybe it's just that I would have, sought mentorship a little hard. Like I would have pushed for that. And also, unfortunately, I didn't really see a lot of people in my industry. Jendai mentioned that she went to, or she studied fashion, and so did I. And we know that the fashion industry is dominated by white women. So just like being in that space, and your peers, they're women, but they're white. And so there's just like, you don't always feel safe to talk about certain things. And you're always like feeling like you have to level up, or show that you're good enough, or you can work harder, or you could do more. And so through my journey, there was a bit of I was lacking confidence, I remember, but it was also because I wasn't encouraged to ask for more, to step into conversations and discuss salary. And if I was told, no to my face that I wasn't getting an increase for a promotion, like, what do you do next? Because that actually happened to me. I said, oh, okay, well, what is my pay increase with this promotion? And I was told there isn't one. because I didn't have any skills in negotiation, I was like stumped. And looking back at my younger self, I wish I could have went in and helped her, but I didn't even have that community to, or peers, or even just like, yeah, peers. Let's just start there and saying like, this is how much you should be making. And that's why I think it's interesting how I evolved and created an organization where, you know, I was like, look, the people that I'm around and they have all this talent, and like, I want to hold space. So it was like, you're going to carve out a table for yourself. And I didn't know it was happening. It ended up happening. It was organic. And here I am. And I'm actually, you know, working for myself. You know, Roz, I related to that last thing you said. Maybe that was always what it was supposed to be. So, you know, I'm grateful for the turn of events, because it's opened my eyes so that I can go and talk to the youth and mentor when I see the opportunity to do so.
Can I just talk about that a little bit too? I'm totally feeling you, Michelle, because oh man, working in the fashion industry and just being the only Black face there, it's hard. And then also the whole negotiating aspect, like that's a huge part. I mean, obviously you have to deal with other things, but that's a really big part, and like something I'm such a advocate for. One of my proudest moments as a working professional was that I negotiated a $20,000 salary increase because I was moving companies. So my company was going under and it was being bought by a new company, and all the designers were leaving, and I was trying to leave too, but I couldn't find a job. But that's another story. So, so I met with the CEO. I told him, you know, I'm a big proponent of having like everything written down, like this is what I want, blah, blah, blah. So I negotiated with him and got a $20,000 salary increase. And then once I saw other people were quitting, I was like, actually, I want 25,000. So, so it was definitely one of my proudest moments, and something that I say everybody should negotiate their salary, especially at the beginning, because that if you're planning to stay with the company for a while, you're not going to get big increases, you know, every year or whatever. It's going to be 2%, 3%, whatever. But if you can negotiate, know your worth, and negotiate that big salary in the beginning, like it will, yeah, behoove you.
Yeah, let's talk more about that sense of self-worth. You know, that doesn't just materialize on your first job interview, right? So,
Right.
So much of the work that all of you are doing, from designing toys to holding space for arts, you know, shepherding people through the workspace, and Roz nurturing, you know, every aspect of creativity, is about self-worth. You know, it's really about this nurturing that needs to happen. Where does it start? I mean, how do you all feel that, how do we broadcast this aspect of it, and connect those dots for people that don't see it yet? I mean, I would put it to Michelle, because so much of the work that, I mean, we have, you know, we have this beautiful photographic installation here at CL Creative Space. It's in the front when you first walk in to our like lobby and cafe space. I encourage you guys to go check out Her Place is In. Some of the photos are there. It's really beautiful, and more than that, it sets the tone. It's a message of like self-love and empowerment for women the moment you lay your eyes on it. And people are so moved by these photographs when they come into our space. It creates a subliminal frequency. And so, you know, part of doing the arts is internal, right? It's the work that you're doing for yourself, but how also are we projecting that for the community. Michelle, if you want to speak on that.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for explaining the feeling that people get. I think that's really powerful. And I also want to mention the vice president of the organization, Brianna Gardner, who is also the photographer of those photos. And I, creative direct with her and style, and we really think about the person that we're serving first and foremost. And so our intention is to first build community, empower femininity, celebrate diversity, and really redefine beauty. Like, that was the intention of that project. And we wanted to kind of like take off the mask, like take off the makeup, really take off those layers, so that we can start to get vulnerable with ourselves and share with others like who we are in our skin, and the project was titled Skin. And, it was like you in your rawest form. It's uncomfortable, it's scary. And I was featured as well in that shot, the first main shot. And then I took it, and then I was like, okay, I got to go back to getting all the production situated. But I remember just feeling like, okay, we need to empower these women. We need to create this safe space for them to come to the beach at 6 a.m. in the cold in pretty much undergarments. And I was like encouraging, like, you've got this, y'all got this. And yet I was like, I'm not putting this on. I'm not showing up and getting in that photo, because I too was like feeling so bare, I was feeling like I can't expose myself like this. So the fact that we were able to accomplish it, and I had to have that moment with myself, like, this is your body, this is what you come in, this is who you are, and really celebrating that and all the imperfections that come with us. And so how do we uplift one another and start to be compassionate for where everyone's at in their life too, because you're going to have ebbs and flows mentally. There's our mental health is always impacted by stresses in our life. And we really are like, let's just take this moment to be here with each other and be present and build this community. And it was so powerful because it evolved into our activism. And I was just impressed by their willingness to join the project and show up as themselves. But it wasn't easy to do. And I'm so happy that we were able to help these women get out of, that outer image and really get in touch with their hearts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think when we talk about that self-worth, that's that ripple effect, right? So you continue to carry that with you into the hard conversations, Jende, like you're saying, where you're representing yourself. And then, it comes down to education about negotiation and representing oneself and navigating a work environment. I mean, not everyone is going to work for themselves and have their own business. So, I mean, Precious, I'd love to hear you talk more about what that looks like for women who are entering the job force or are already in it.
One of the things I appreciate, of course, everything that's been said. Michelle said something that really stuck with me around self and reflection. We have this exercise with a pocket mirror. We noticed, no matter where we were when we were having conversations, that when women would get up and talk, they would often describe themselves through their boss's lens or through their partner's lens or something else, but they never saw themselves like for themselves. Not never, but you know what I mean? Like, it was this theme that just kept coming up. And so we got these pocket mirrors, and on one side is the logo, and on the other side there's a mirror. And so we tell people, like, they're looking at the logo, and they're like, and we're like, when you turn this over, no, when you need to see beauty and power, whenever you need to see beauty and power, I need you to turn this over. And then they turn it over, and I'm telling you, no matter what age, people just, like, we're all the power, all the beauty, all of it, because this is who we are. And so I think part of it is this notion around how we define ourselves, and then how people around, how much value we give to the definition of others around us. So the young people in the offices I work in, I just always over and over reinforce, you were brilliant when you woke up, you'll be brilliant later tonight. Whatever happens in the course of the day is someone else's definition. So if you're listening to that for guidance, filter filter appropriately, because we're all coming with all of our own biases, and we live in a society that absolutely categorizes and puts people in boxes. And part of it's the way our brain works and how we've been conditioned, and all of the things that go on with just how much information we're processing all the time. But I would offer that we aren't defined by our roles, although so many messages that we receive say that we are. And so it's undoing that constant messaging around what does self-value really mean? Because whatever I achieved, and again, it was hard, as a young person, thinking I was gonna fail. And then at the time I was coming up, everything was about business school. You gotta go to business school, it's business school. And so, that was my path, and all of it kind of worked out in the end. And I had a music scholarship, a full ride to go do music, and went to business school. And I was always chasing something, but it wasn't the thing that was ever going to satisfy me. And I think what satisfies me is that I am good right now, no matter what job I have, and no matter who's around. I have to be good with who I see in that mirror. And if that's true, and understanding that what happens at work is rarely personal, but rarely is what's playing out about you, about me. It was about everything else, that people were just trained a certain way and they're doing these things. Once you clear all that clutter, you can actually kind of navigate above or kind of beyond that. But without, to your point, without people telling you the truth, and without understanding, and now all of this research is coming out, things are being said on TV that weren't said before about these topics that I think are elevating the conversation in a way that when we talk to our girls now, they'll have a whole lexicon that we didn't even have. So that's why the stories I think are important. Hearing each of your stories, that's the thing that's real for me. I may not understand it, but once I hear your story, when something happens to me, I go, that's what they were talking about. Or somebody who everybody's leaving, well, Janae said that's the time to go in and ask for more money. So I know that's the time I need to step up. So those are some of the things that come to mind.
Yeah. It's so special to have you all be able to connect dots for people, because I know that you do it in your own social circles many, many times. So I just want to acknowledge that, to have these conversations and share not just your professional perspectives, but your personal aspect is generous. It's appreciated. It's no obligation. So, it's inspiring, and yeah, I'm incredibly grateful. I want to talk about invisible labor. Does anyone want to define that for our guests today? I think that, this is part, I think it ties into the pay gap, because, and what we talk about self-worth, because oftentimes in corporate environments, or, smaller companies, a lot of assumptions can be made, societal expectations of women's roles in a workplace. And we'll add another layer to that of Black women. And a lot of that is expected labor that's not appreciated, it's not official, it's not paid, it may be emotional labor, it may be actual responsibilities and tasks. that go unnoticed, and are often like assumed responsibilities. And I know that many people have like personal anecdotes about situations that they've been in, whether it was an assumption that you were going to, you know, host the birthday party for someone and gonna go get the cake at 6 a.m. because you're just that great person that you are, and you're gonna do that. And I wonder if any of you have experiences with that, where you felt that that was something that gets overlooked, especially when it comes to salary.
I definitely have experiences with this. Being one of the few Black designers everywhere I go, my voice is looked at as, okay, let's ask Shunde, you know, how this looks or what Black people like. And I'm kind of torn because, of course, I want to make better product, and always, you know what I mean? And I want product to be made for Black people. But at the same time, I'm going to let HR know, I'm going to let my manager know anywhere I go. If I'm doing this work, you're going to know about it. Like, I'm not just going to be doing this work and just, I mean, it is sort of out of the goodness of my heart, but also I'm going to advocate for myself, and I'm going to put this on my reviews. These are the committees that I'm on. I may have volunteered for them. Sometimes I'm appointed to them, but I need for people to know that this is what I'm working on top of everything else that I'm working on. So yes, I definitely know about the invisible labor, but I try to make it visible at all times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can I speak a little bit to the invisible labor? Thank you. I've been working in with a lot of nonprofits a lot of my life, and I think the nonprofit industrial complex has just got invisible labor is so much of what we do, so much of what we do, especially when I found when I was even starting my own nonprofit, because I had decided for myself that I would delay my own payment to create this organization. So I mortgaged my house. I did all sorts of different things to say, I'll just take care of me so that I can start this organization and take care of everybody else. It was my own doing that delayed my payment to myself. And I had to, after about a year, I was like, what am I doing? I've stepped right into the same pitfalls that have been created for me by other people, and I'm perpetuating this myself onto myself. And I had a board that I went to, and I said, hey, y'all, I think it's time maybe to start paying me because this getting hard to do all this work. And I mean, talk about invisible labor. All the labor. And my board really worked hard to try to make that happen. It took a minute though, and I actually had to change board members, and I had to raise all the money for my salary myself, which is also very common in the nonprofit world. Like, the money's not there, raise your own salary. Just all these agreements that we make to do what we think we're doing good for the society, but we're not doing good for ourselves. And so I've realized really in the last year how important it is to put myself first and to make sure that my cup is not empty, because I can't pour from an empty cup. And I had to learn that the hard way. And so now I'm like, oh no, this will be my salary, and my salary will actually be up here. It won't be this little entry level thing, because I've worked hard to get here, and I'll be damned if I do this to my own self. So I find that that's an interesting struggle to check in on your own biases against yourself, to check in on your own areas of self-worth, you know, like, am I worth what everybody else is worth today, right now? Must I delay it for myself? Why? Why are we taught that that's okay? Why are we taught that that's the only way to build? I don't see CEOs doing that of, you know, Fortune 500 companies. They're not doing that. So I had to learn a little bit from the for-profit world about how to make a nonprofit really work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and learning that is something you can certainly navigate on a day-to-day and find your way, but the power of mentorship, the power of having leaders before you that can advise, having networks, business or personal, that you can have these conversations and share that information, and people who look out for you. I mean, Roz, like that story about just your friend and colleague who happens to be at your place and sees your paycheck and chooses to speak on it. It's a different trajectory for your entire life. I think a lot of times when you're younger, you don't have that hindsight of understanding that, like, speaking up, that friend just literally spoke up and commented on it, and it was completely impactful. To this day, right now, we are talking about it in a public space, so there's so much power in just small movements, and those seemingly small choices that people make, that transparency that we kept talking about. There was another statistic that I came across with, that two things, which I think is important when we talk about sort of calls to action and actionable items that people can do. We've talked about self-worth internally for Black women, representing, learning the art of negotiation, being empowered. And the other piece of that from that corporate side, which, none of us here are representing corporations. So it's like, how do we take this knowledge and manifest it from that side? And this is what struck me. So almost a third of workers say that they will not apply to a company with a gender pay discrepancy. Now, this is significant because, as I said in the beginning, only 26% of companies actually disclose that information, right? So yes, now we have, a sizable chunk of people who say they won't even go to the company if the pay gap is there. But unless we are informed, we can't make those kinds of decisions. And then the other piece of that was that in a poll, 66% of Americans said they were less likely to buy a product from a company that does not pay women fairly. And again, this was specifically a gender pay, not a Black women's equal pay question. But when we talk about how we're having more exposure through grassroots media outlets, I think that these statistics really jump out at me, because through exposure of corporate data, it actually puts more of the power into consumers' hands and into people who are pursuing working with various companies. And I wonder, Precious, if that is something that comes into conversation when you are working with people.
I can barely, I'm holding it together. My question would be, my question would be, do you know what people get paid? If the number is that much, then maybe people need to go ask today, because we know that the pay is pervasive. So I would also wonder if those people were asked a follow-up question, like, do the people who you set salary for make the same? I wonder what the answer to that question would be, because we have very selective memory and historical memory, and things we all have a lot of people, most of us have a sense for moral good. And there are these things that are just so easy that we practice that we don't connect the two. And so somehow work is separate. But if you ask me what I do, well, sure, I do the right thing. So I was so distracted by the numbers that I hope I can get to the essence of your question, which was about, do we see this? So people are just like all of us on this panel, people are advocating every day to get what they deserve for the same work and even just to be recognized. So that that other labor, the other labor, like around, I know most of the women that I know, or we used to have this thing around, you know, if you really want to know what's going on in a company, you need to find a Black woman and ask her. Well, guess what? All of that weighed on her, right? Like, and it took a toll on her. And if that's what you, if that's what we continue to do, then that is that labor you're talking about. When someone comes and they want to come and tell me what's going on, I actually don't have time for that, because I have to take care of myself. But you weren't talking about that anymore. You were talking about, but to me, like, it's so interrelated, because I had a young person working for me who didn't fit the bill. He didn't play out the way that people wanted him to. And then I found out he was making substantially less than everyone else without any information about, and I was a supervisor and had no information. So I think there's also ways about, you were talking about information transparency. I think that we don't even know what we don't know. And I'm saying that, oh, did I freeze? Let's see.
You did.
Not sure if I froze with like my, okay. The short of it is, I just want to make such more going on than we're made aware of. And the headlines are only telling us a bit of the story. It's good to have the headlines and it's good to have the data, but it's about culture fit in terms of, is that person in your organization going to fight for you when the doors are?
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, that's a really important distinction, and I'm glad you said that. I am so sad to say that I have so much more on these papers. We have 5 more minutes. I mean, like Precious said, these are all woven together. You all have so many insights. I'm excited because you know, part of the work we do at CL, so we have this saying, we keep saying, we make space to be human. We do our work. You know, we work with clients and we continue to make space to be human, however that needs to be defined. And that's woven into everything that what we do here. So having these conversations, sharing, oh, Precious, I think I might have lost you in the connection, and you just dropped so much wisdom on us. I hope you can get back on here. Lost my train of thought. We know that it's incredibly taxing to have these conversations at times. So I appreciate you all coming together and feeling like this is a safe space to share and build on each other and have this affinity for those that are, for each other, and for those that are watching, and then for those allies that are, you know, passionate about doing their part, which is really important here. We've demonstrated so clearly how there's so many simple things that people can do to build transparency, to voice, you know, these concerns to their companies, to represent. So I'm grateful for that. I wanted to go around quickly and just have you each say something, whatever comes to mind, about how this pay gap has a larger impact. Because we've talked about how many things are woven together, but, you know, for example, I know that I know that, you know, this gap in pay for Black women, for every like Black mother who is not getting paid the fair wages, you know, her children are witnessing this and internalizing it. And if they're not seeing or learning that there is a difference, to advocate for themselves, or you know, to have this systemic change, it has the potential to impact yet another generation. So if someone else wants to jump on that.
I also see this as it affects generational wealth and the generational wealth gap. that a lot of people are just learning about. But if you're making less money, I mean, you have less to save and less to give your kids and grandkids and buy a home and land and all of that. So it's definitely a bigger picture, not just you or me.
Mm-hmm. Michelle, larger, yeah.
Yeah, I can't help but to also think about generational wealth, because just like y'all have said, if we are not being paid what we should be paid, there's sacrifices that come into play, and choices that you have to make that will hinder you from maybe going after something, and being able to, like, whether it's tapping in your talent or having to make a decision on self-care practices, or doing something for yourself because something else is more important, or it just takes the priority. So it's going to impact like our mental health, and I'll add the mental health aspect to that, because we are constantly on this struggle mentality, like survival mode. Sorry, that's what I'm gonna say. The surviving is always there. So if we can get away from that, that would do so much for our mental health.
I guess I mean, all those things. and I guess what I would add is, just the effect of this on the most vulnerable population just has a rippling effect throughout the rest of the world. So, if you start with the most vulnerable and those folks are not receiving equal pay, then it just goes up the chain to the next. And then it just goes up the chain to the next, and then to the next, and then to the next. So it doesn't just stay there. It really affects the entire global community. So we've got to start with us. We've got to start right here. This is exactly where we have to start in order to make a real difference for our whole community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Precious, do you want to add anything to that? We were just going round about larger impacts.
Just echo the same sentiments said eloquently. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I hate to wrap this up. It is such a joy to be with you guys here today. Thank you for all of you and your time. And for those of you all that joined us today to watch, we had so many people tune in today. I feel really grateful for that. And for those of you that end up watching this later at a later date, we are going to share resources and tools, and want to host space for people that have follow-up questions. So we'll post on our Instagram platform about how to go about that. But until then, thank you all. I hope to do this again soon, and hopefully in person in the very near future. So
thank you, Miriam. Thank you so much. It's great.
Please take good care of yourselves. All right. Take care.
So nice meeting you, ladies.
You too.